Chandler Smith confirms he does not have a ride for 2025 and may be out of NASCAR at the end of this year, and it seems like we might be getting closer to potential announcement of Ryan Preece headed over to RFK Racing in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight on those really quickly. We're first going to talk about Grant Infinger. Now, Grant Infinger did win the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race yesterday at Homestead Miami Speedway and went back-to-back. It was owned by Joseph Strigley that Grant Infinger won at Homestead by 17.516 seconds. That is the second largest margin of victory in Craftsman Truck Series history. The largest margin of victory, I believe, is about 18.1 or 18.2 seconds, done by Mike Bliss back in 2002 at the Kroger 225. The fact it's been that long is absolutely wild. Obviously, it was because of fuel miles. Nick Sanchez had been about 10 seconds back, but obviously ran out of gas and did end up losing a chance. And the guys on the fresh tires could not get up there to challenge Grant Infinger. The fact that we have a new record, or the second largest margin of victory, is kind of crazy to see. I don't know if we'll ever see that again with how competitive the truck fields can be. Pretty wild to see Grant Infinger has a new record. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Bonsignore. As Justin Bonsignore last night won the 2024 Wheel and Modified Tour Championship by winning the race, I believe, at Martinsville. Justin Bonsignore, I believe, has become a four-time champion in the Wheel and Modified Tour, so congratulations to him. Justin's been one of the best drivers in history of Wheel and Modified Tour, one of the winningest drivers in history. He got a chance and opportunity to race in Xfinity Series at New Hampshire, where she showed out and had a top 5 car. Unfortunately, didn't get to finish. I think he deserved, but I think he's a super potential, has a ton of talent, and I'd love to see him come over and do some more Xfinity Series stuff and Truck Series stuff, but it's a major win for him, and nonetheless, congratulations to him on winning the 2024 Wheel and Modified Tour Championship. He absolutely deserved it, and he earned it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about lead changes from Homestead Miami Speedway. As it was reported by Mike Ford from the communications director for NASCAR, he says there were 33 lead changes during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Homestead Miami Speedway. That is the most in track history in all three of the divisions, and especially in the NASCAR Cup Series. It was a super competitive race. So many battles for the lead. Some of that sure was during green flag pit stops, but the majority of those on the racetrack were legit battles for the lead on restarts, throughout the packs, had a really great finish, and to see that we had a new record at Homestead shows how amazing and really great this race is. We'll talk about the potential of this race hosting a championship in the latter portion of this episode, but man, absolutely just one of the best races we've seen. Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott putting on a show near the end, Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick, William Byron, all the guys putting on a fantastic show. It was an absolute amazing and fantastic race at Homestead Miami Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Mexico GP. While the NASCAR Cup Series race is going on at Homestead Miami Speedway, you had the Mexico Grand Prix for Formula One. At the start of the race, Carlos Sainz had not the best start in the world. There was a crash that took place on lap number 1. Yuki Tsunoda, I think, got turned, unfortunately, by Alex Albon. Both then fell out of the race. There was some controversy between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, where Max Verstappen got 2 10-second penalties, meaning he got a 20-second penalty by the end of the event. And this would, unfortunately, take Max out of contention for the win. Lando did get up to second by the end of the event, but Carlos Sainz had such a big lead that Lando was not going to have a chance and opportunity to catch him, and that would mean Carlos Sainz would come off the corner and pick up his second win of 2024 and his 4th career Formula One win. We obviously know Carlos Sainz is going to Williams next year. This is a really huge win. The first time he's had multiple wins in a year, so that's a major deal for Carlos. I think he earned it. He had the best car all day. Did an absolutely amazing and fantastic job. And nonetheless, like I mentioned, congratulations to Carlos Sainz on an incredible win, a well-deserved victory. And I think, even though he's going to be at Williams, and I think he's going to be somewhat strong next year, it is a shame to see he won't be in top-tier equipment next year. But I think he did overall an amazing and fantastic job and absolutely earned the win and did it all right and really great job, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brett Holmes Racing. As it was shockingly announced on Friday afternoon that Brett Holmes Racing will be shutting down for the remainder of 2024 and also plans to not come back in 2025. It was confirmed in the report that Brett Holmes is still looking for a ride going into 2025 and is looking for funding and sponsorship to be full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. This is really disappointing here. Brett Holmes has been a staple of the Craftsman Truck Series the last couple years. He's had some really strong performances, especially early in the year. He had some really strong runs. I think he got a couple top 10 finishes early in the year and has shown a lot of potential. I really would love to see Brett Holmes get a top chance and opportunity. And the reason I think this happened, obviously it became reported and confirmed this week that Mike Shiplett, of course, moved over to work with Matt Mills, who we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. I think when it got confirmed that Mike Shiplett was moving over to Nice Motorsports, I had a funny feeling this team was not going to be back for the remainder of the year, but it is a shame to see they're not coming back in 2025. This is a team that, while they're not the fastest organization in the world, they have shown a lot of potential this year. So it definitely is a shame to see that Brett Holmes Racing will not be back next year, but it isn't the most shocking thing in the world too. I really hope that Brett can find a really good chance and opportunity, because I truly do believe that Brett Holmes should be racing full-time in NASCAR. Again, it's a shame and it's disappointing to see, and it's sad to see Brett Holmes Racing, after also winning a championship a couple years ago in the ARCA Series back in 2018 or 19 or 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I think he does deserve to be full-time racing in NASCAR, in my opinion, in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 2025 Wheel and Modified Tour schedule. As it was announced on Saturday morning that the 2025 Wheel and Modified Tour schedule has been officially revealed. The season will kick off on February 8th at New Smyrna. Then on March 30th, they'll race at Thompson. After that, on May the 3rd, they'll race at Monadnock. Then after that, on May 18th, they'll race at North Wilkesboro. After that, on May 31st, they'll race at Seacon. Then on June 14th, they'll race at Riverhead Speedway. On June 28th, they'll race at White Mountain. After that, on July 12th, they'll race at Lancaster Speedway. And then on July 19th, they'll go back to Monadnock. After that, on August 6th, they'll head back to Thompson Speedway. And then on August 14th, they will race at Richmond. Then on August 30th, they'll race at Oswego Speedway. Then on September 6th, they'll head back to Riverhead Speedway. And then after that, on September 20th, they'll head to Houghton, New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And then after that, on October 12th, they'll head to Thompson once again. And the final race for the Wheel and Modified Tour, I believe, will be on October 18th at Martinsville, where they will crown a champion during that event. This is a really solid schedule for the Wheel and Modified Tour. They're also going to be having a lot more money coming toward the series, and Wheelin has extended their entitlement sponsorship with the Modified Tour, I believe, for the next 4 or 5 years. So this is really huge for the series. And I got to say, this schedule does look really strong going into next year, and I think the Wheel and Modified Tour usually puts on some really solid and really great and fantastic racing, and I think the racing will only continue to get better as time progresses and goes on in the Wheel and Modified Tour, and I'm probably going to see Justin Bonsignor continue to be really strong in this series going forward. So I'm really happy about this nonetheless, and glad to see that the Wheel and Modified Tour has been officially releasing their schedule for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Frankie Munoz. Now, earlier this week, I believe it was on Tuesday morning, Frankie Munoz officially confirmed they'd be joining the Rayun brothers full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025, driving number 33 truck. Now, earlier this week on Friday, before the Truck Series race took place on Saturday, Frankie Munoz actually spoke on heading over to Rayun for 2025. He says he is definitely excited to go racing full-time with this organization in 2025. But he also talked about the fact that he was really hoping to have a lot more sponsorship for this upcoming season. However, he kind of revealed that it's been very difficult to find sponsors. This has been one of the biggest issues of Frankie Munoz for a while, is that he has not been able to gather the funding in the sponsorship. Obviously, Frankie would have probably had a lot more sponsors if he was continuing the acting career, but he kind of stopped doing a lot of acting to focus on racing in the late 2000s. Unfortunately, he had a really bad crash on his way up in the open wheel world and wanted to come over to NASCAR a few years ago, and to be fair, he did show some stuff in ARCA. Now, he is going to have to be very patient going into next year, because Raymond Brothers, and it was kind of shown this weekend at Homestead, there was a lot of frustration him behind the wheel to 33, and I do think there probably will be some growing frustration throughout next year, because we know he wants to be super competitive and be in a great truck. The problem is, like I said, with the Raymond Brothers, they're not the fastest organization in the world, so I'm not expecting him to do much in 2025. I think he will have a couple top 20s by the end of the year, but I think that's pretty much it. I'm not expecting him to be a major threat and contender, and I do think some struggles are going to come along the way for Frankie in 2025, but I'm still happy to see that he will be racing, of course, full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Lane Riggs. Now, earlier this week, before the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series took place, NASCAR actually asked Lane Riggs to add a bunch of weight in the car. Then it became reported by Bob Pockers after the Craftsman Truck Series race concluded at Homestead that NASCAR actually confiscated Lane Riggs' steering wheel. And according to what Bob has said, there could be an additional penalties that are coming for Lane Riggs. Apparently his truck was very underweight. It's kind of similar to the Alex Bowman penalty, where Alex Bowman got disqualified after the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Charlotte Roval, and unfortunately for him, he was eliminated from the playoffs. Luckily for Lane Riggs wasn't in the playoffs this year, so this really isn't going to affect him in that area. Lane had really good pace and speed, of course, in the Craftsman Truck Series, but if you're, of course, adding and losing weight, it can affect the truck. Now, NASCAR, if they are going to penalize Lane Riggs for something like this, the penalty most likely will come either Tuesday or tomorrow, or most likely Wednesday. Usually, NASCAR has their penalty report that comes out in the middle of the week. And I could see probably a little bit of a fine perhaps coming for Lane, and maybe a points penalty as well. I don't think he's going to get suspended or anything like that for this. I don't think we've seen a suspension for something like this ever, but I do think there could be at least some sort of penalty coming in. Adding weight and taking weight out and ballast falling out of the truck especially can really play a major role. If your truck or car is underweight, penalties can definitely come your way and you can absolutely be affected. So again, we'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to that, because I do think the story could have a lot of implications going forward for Lane Riggs, but I do think it's interesting. They confiscated it. They're probably going to be taking a look at it. They'll probably take it back to the R&D Center, of course, and they'll probably make a decision whether or not to penalize Lane Riggs. I do think there is a chance that there could be some potential penalties coming for Lane Riggs later this week. We'll have to wait and see what kind of penalties Lane Riggs ends up receiving later this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Derek Krauss. Now, it was reported by Matt Weaver from Sportsnet that Derek Krauss actually spoke to him about his 2025 plans. And according to what Derek actually had told him, he is still working on his 2025 plans and when it comes to racing. And there is a chance and possibility that Derek Krauss could come back to NASCAR in some sort of capacity in 2025. Derek Krauss so far this year in 2024 has been competing part-time, racing, of course, in the number 16 car for College Racing on a part-time basis, considering he's worked with College Racing in the past, actually raced with them in 2023, and actually won a stage at Homestead Miami Speedway near the end of the year. Now, Derek Krauss is someone that a lot of people think is a very, very nice guy, but it was noted in the article from Matt Weaver that apparently Derek Krauss doesn't have the killer instinct that a lot of owners really want, which is a pretty big reason why, unfortunately, he has not been able to find a ride full-time for next year. I remember back in like 2017 and 2018 and how much hype Derek Krauss had. Many people thought Derek Krauss was going to be the next big thing. And then when he came to the Truck Series, driving for McAnally Hilgeman, he kind of struggled. He did almost make the playoffs, to be fair, in 2020, but kind of struggled over the years. And then you had Christian Eckes come in, and he set the world on fire in 2023, getting 4 victories. And then people were kind of questioning, is Derek that good of a driver or not? Again, I would love to see Derek Krauss get the chance and opportunity to be full-time in 2025, but we'll have to wait and see. It's all going to come down to sponsorship and funding. Now, Derek does have a little bit of funding. There was a rumor, I remember not too long ago, about him being potentially linked to a Spire truck, perhaps, for next year, and he has made starts for Spire, but I don't know if he's going to end up in a Spire Motorsports car or truck at all in 2025. He's not going to be going back to college next year, so we don't know what he's doing at the moment for 2025. We'll have to wait and see how things end up playing out. But I do think there is a chance that he will be rideless going into the next year. But I do think there's also a chance he will at least end up being part-time in the 2025 campaign. We'll see where he ends up going in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Pollard. As it once again was repeated by Matt Weaver, that Bubba Pollard actually spoke to Matt Weaver earlier this week. Now, Bubba Pollard, of course, will be making his second ever NASCAR Xfinity Series start this upcoming weekend at Martinsville Speedway, driving number 26 car for Sam Hunt Racing. And he kind of actually revealed that this may not be the last Xfinity start that he may end up making ever. Because of the sponsorship that he has from one of the companies that he's working with for the remainder of this year, he could be making some more potential starts in NASCAR in 2025. Now, Bubba Pollard did make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut earlier this year. I believe it was at Richmond. He had a very impressive run for Junior Motorsports, finishing, I believe, inside the top 5 and showed race-winning speed throughout the whole entire event. And Bubba Pollard is one of the greatest short track racers out there. And it would be really cool to see him get a chance and opportunity to race full time. Now, the problem for him is he doesn't have the biggest funding and sponsorship in the world. But if a company like this company that's working with him, as like SEMA or something like that, is working with him, this company could help him find some rides for next year. It could lead him racing part-time for Junior Motorsports, maybe in the A car perhaps. That could certainly be a possibility if Sammy Smith, of course, moves to the 9 for the team next year. It could go to Sam Hunt Racing. That could be an option for next year. But I don't know what's going to happen with Bubba Parsell. But I really love to see Bubba Parsell get the chance and an opportunity to race full-time next year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he will be racing in the Cars Tour next year at some point. But I think it absolutely needs to happen where he gets the chance and opportunity to maybe, just maybe, get to run full-time in the future. I don't think it's going to happen, like I said, because of sponsorship and funding, but I think it'd be really cool, and I think a lot of fans would definitely be happy to see a driver like, of course, Bubba Parsell get the chance and opportunity to maybe, just maybe, be full-time in the series in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race this past week at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, you probably saw some of the big wrecks that Ryan Blaney was involved. During practice on lap 1 of the Group B practice session he was involved in, Ryan Blaney had a cut tire and hit the outside wall really hard. He was complaining a little bit on the radio about being a little bit of pain, and he basically took a really major hit. Then during the NASCAR Cup Series race, after starting in the back, he was starting to charge his way up to the front of the field. And then we saw the big wreck between Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski actually had come back across the racetrack and he hit the outside wall very, very hard, that being Ryan Blaney. He knocked the toe link on both sides, if I'm not mistaken, and had a major amount of damage. And after the race had concluded, Ryan Blaney had basically stated that he was in a lot of pain. Now, earlier this week, he spoke to the media in regards to the situation, and he basically told them that, yeah, he's fine. He is okay after the hard hits that he has received. He also noted that he plans to have discussions with NASCAR in regards to more when it comes to safety and hard hits, though he does praise NASCAR for having a car that is definitely a lot safer than it was a couple years ago. Ryan Blaney has taken a lot of big hits in the next-gen car. You go back to what happened at Daytona last year in the summer when he was trying to basically find a way to get a win before the end of the regular season because he had an outside shot, I think, at one point of winning the regular season championship. He had a really bad crash in Nashville. Talladega had a ferocious hit running into Ross Chastain. And he's had some big and scary incidents throughout his NASCAR career that he's not been able to really control. And you kind of worry about it. I do think there's some things that NASCAR definitely has to work on when it comes to the next-gen car, but I do think when it comes to NASCAR safety track, they've been really, really good on that. But I think if there's someone definitely can talk about and continue to make it more safer, it is definitely someone like Ryan Blaney. He's earned the right to talk to NASCAR about something like this, because I think if they could continue doing this and not have him basically have his career end like Kurt Busch's did, unfortunately, last year, I think it'd be really cool to see something like that. Not cool, but it definitely would be really nice to see them have a conversation about it and continue to work toward the safety, because I think it'd be great for them to figure it out and get it situated going forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, we already talked about the fact that Tony Stewart was on the Happy Harvick podcast earlier this week, and he also kind of talked about Stewart Racing's closure. But he also spoke on Kyle Larson once again. Now, he has talked about Kyle Larson and praised Kyle Larson for a very, very long time over the years. He kind of put his hat in the ring of the debate between Kyle Larson and Max Verstappen. He also said that Max Verstappen would probably be pretty competitive over time if he got behind the wheel of the dirt car, because he says that Max, being a really good racer himself, he'd probably be able to get up to speed quickly. He kind of learned from experience from Kevin Magnussen. But he also kind of praised Kyle Larson, calling him a once-in-a-lifetime driver. Now, it is no secret that Tony Stewart wanted Kyle Larson at Stewart Racing. But unfortunately, Ford denied Tony Stewart that opportunity. That's why Kyle Larson ended up at Hendrick Motorsports instead of being in a Stewart Racing car. Now, in the long run, it worked out a lot better. In 2021, Kyle Larson won a championship, won 10 races, and has won nearly 30 NASCAR Cup Series races up to this point, and does have an outside shot to get his second championship in his really illustrious Cup career up to this point. Meanwhile, Stewart Racing, 3 years after this, it is unfortunately closing. But I think this was the turning point to why Tony Stewart ended up shutting his team down at the end of the year. I think Tony, had he been able to bring him back to the organization, I do think there would have been a really great chance and opportunity that Stewart Racing might not end up shutting down. It is a shame to see that SHR is shutting down, But also at the same time, it does make a little bit of sense when you kind of think about it. Tony, of course, has a lot of biz interests outside at this point. He could have gotten Kyle Busch too, by the way, and Zane Smith at one point, but obviously that, of course, did not end up happening either. Could have also had Hailie Deegan at one point from what I know, but didn't, of course, end up happening. But nonetheless, I look at the situation, right, for SHR shutting down, and I think Tony not getting Kyle Larson and Ford denying him a chance and opportunity to pick up Kyle Larson was definitely a major and a pretty big factor to why he was not able to get him for the season, which was very disappointing to see. But I think, Tony Stewart's a big fan of Larson, and I think that, especially with some of the stuff in the biz stuff they've been doing, especially High Limit Series, I think it'd be really cool if Larson and Tony got to work together in some other way going into the not-so-distant future, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeremy Bullins. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Friday afternoon that Jeremy Bullins is no longer a crew chief at the Wood Brothers. In fact, he has left the Team Penske organization as a whole. It was confirmed that Grant Hutchins is the interim crew chief. Now, Grant Hutchins has been working at Team Penske for a long time. He is currently the engineer, I believe, on the number 21 car for the Wood Brothers. So he'll be the crew chief for the remainder of this year. We do not know at the moment who will be the crew chief for Josh Berry, but we'll get to that here in just a second. This is definitely a little bit shocking. Jeremy Bullins has been in the Team Penske group for a very long time. I believe since the early 2010s. He's won races with Ryan Blaney. He nearly won races with him at Team Penske and won a race with him in 2017. And then he worked with drivers, of course, like Austin Cindric in 2022, where Austin Cindric, of course, ended up picking up a win in the Daytona 500, but did struggle a little bit over time. And then he went to work with Harrison Burton for 2024. And let's be real, it has not worked out very well. I think Jeremy Bullins is actually a really solid crew chief, so I don't think he was the problem and why his teams were struggling. I don't think that he had inexperienced guys. Austin Cindric, in my opinion, while he's an all-right driver and has shown some potential throughout the year, he's not a guy that's going to set the world on fire for you. And Harrison Burton, there's a reason why he's getting demoted and taking over the 15 for AM Racing, going to Hailie Deegan's seat. Because basically he's a better, not as good of a driver. Yes, he's a solid driver, but he's not the best driver in the world. And I feel like for Jeremy Bullins, I don't know what this means for him going forward because him being out of the Team Penske group altogether, I don't know where he ends up going at this point for 2025. I would be shocked if he ends up in a great team next year. Maybe Rick Ware Racing, perhaps. There have been rumors about Chris Lawson maybe going to front row. Maybe he works with Corey LaJoie next year, perhaps. That could certainly be a possibility. We don't know the crew chief lineup yet for Rick Ware going into 2025. There have been rumors. I've seen some people suggest RFK Racing with that third car, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. That could certainly be a possibility. But this also has effect because with Jeremy Bullins leaving, we don't know who the crew chief's going to be for Josh Berry next year. There have been rumors about Travis Mack being open, but there's also rumors that Travis Mack probably also could end up going over to Legacy. What about Ryan Burgundy? Ryan Burgundy could be someone to watch out for as a possibility. There's, like I said, rumors of Chris Lawson going back to front row. So maybe Ryan Burgundy becomes a crew chief. I think Ryan's a really solid dude. That could certainly be a possibility. I think it'll be very interesting to see, though, who they end up picking up for 2025 and who ends up being the crew chief for Josh Berry next year. But I think it's going to be very interesting to watch as time progresses and goes on as we wait for it at this particular point. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race, which I suppose many of you have already watched the Cup Series race at this point, you saw the late race incident between Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon. Now, Kyle Larson was battling very, very hard for the win between Ryan Blaney. Kyle Larson early in the race had a flat tire, and he was recovering up to the front and was performing one of the greatest comebacks in NASCAR Cup Series history. He tried to make a move 3 wide coming around 11 or 10 laps to go in the event. He got loose, tried to go through the middle, and got into Ryan Blaney and spun himself out. Got a ton of damage on the diffuser. They had to fix the diffuser flap. That brought out the final caution. This will result in Kyle Larson, instead of finishing in second, being above the cutoff line, and would end up with him finishing in 13th place. Now, I saw a lot of Kyle Larson fans that were going after Austin Dillon for the incident. My opinion is this, and I'll get to it in a second, but first, Kyle Larson did say that Austin Dillon really did nothing wrong at all. He says he didn't do anything wrong, but he did not blame Austin Dillon. He said he went for the move and went for the position. And looking at the situation here, I don't think that Austin Dillon deserves any crap for this. Austin Dillon did nothing wrong here. I know there's been a lot of criticism, some justified toward Austin Dillon for some of the stuff on the track, like what happened to Richmond. But in this situation, Austin Dillon's not at fault. Kyle Larson made the move through the middle, which you can't blame Kyle Larson. I think he had to go for it at that time, and he wanted to make that move. He could have waited a few laps to go for the move, granted. But I think had he waited too long, he was going to miss his chance and opportunity to make that move. You never know if there's going to be a late race caution, which he, of course, was a late race caution, ended up coming out. You never know when that final yellow flag is going to end up coming out. So you have to sometimes take those chances and opportunities to make those moves. And while it cost Kyle Larson, I don't blame him for making that move right that late in the race. Unfortunately, it puts him below the cutoff line by 7 points, but instead of being like 20 or 25 back, he still has a realistic chance going to Martinsville. And I think you sometimes got to do what you got to do. Kyle Larson, we know, is one of the most aggressive drivers on the racetrack, but that aggression can lead to a lot of amazing things, like that photo finish between him and Chris Buescher earlier this year at Kansas. Kyle Larson's a very aggressive driver, and he's sometimes going to do things that might be criticized, but he's also praised when sometimes it ends up working for him, and that's why Larson is one of the best drivers in the sport currently at the moment, because he does amazing things on the racetrack. Yes, he probably should have been a little bit off and a little bit on the aggression, but at the same time, if you got a chance and opportunity, you got to take it. I don't blame Larson for trying to go for that move in the middle of the race and near the end of the event, in my honest opinion. I've seen people blame Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney was not at fault for the situation, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Benedetto. Now, I saw this post on Reddit, but apparently Don Socket, who owns PsyOps in Viking Motorsports, has confirmed that Matt Benedetto has signed a 2-year contract extension with Viking Motorsports. He also did confirm that it sounds like Viking Motorsports is planning to not work with RSS Racing anymore going into 2025, and they're going to split off and do their own thing going into 2025. It's unknown who the crew chief will be for this car for the next couple of years. This had been originally reported back in May that Matt Benedetto had been planning to run with this team once again in 2025. But to be able to come back to this organization next year is very huge. They noted in their press they're planning to try to finish inside the top 30 in the owner's points going into next year, because the higher you can finish in the owner's points, the better you can be, especially if we do get a rain out at Daytona for qualifying, which, trust me, with Daytona, sometimes you can have that happen. But Matt Benedetto has taken his 38 car that was really struggling with CJ McLaughlin, and there's been times this year where this 38 car has shown a lot of raw pace. Matt Benedetto's had 2 or 3 top 10s, I believe, so far this year, and he has also had a lot of top 20 finishes, and he's done a really solid job throughout the year. There have been a lot of mechanical gremlins throughout the year that have affected this organization and team, but that's something that's going to happen with a new organization. Matt Benedetto is a driver, in my opinion, that is very, very solid and can get the best out of equipment. And I think he is a very talented driver. Remember, he almost won with the Wood brothers a couple times not too long ago, and he was very solid with Rackler Racing last year before he got exponentially fired near the end of the year after confirming he wouldn't be back with Rackley. There were rumors at one point of him going to AM Racing for 2024, even Colleague Racing at one point, but obviously that did not end up happening. I think Matt Benedetto is a very solid driver, and he's shown why he is one of the more underrated drivers in the sport. Look, he has burned bridges over the years. There is no denying that. But you cannot deny that Matt Benedetto is overall a very talented driver who, like I said, can in fact get the best out of equipment. So I really like his potential with this organization, and ultimately I think the goal for next year is, of course, to make every single race and try to finish top 25 in the standings. Build toward the future. Build your organization up, and maybe you could expand to a 2-car operation in the future. That'd be really cool to see. Do I think that's going to happen? Who knows at this point, but I do think it's really, really good to see Matt Benedetto coming back. He's done a really solid and great job with this team, and I do expect that only things are going to get better over time. He's done a really great job and solid job with performance at this team in recent years, and recently this year, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Homestead Miami Speedway. Now, earlier this week, there was an exclusive article with the president of Homestead Miami Speedway with Motorsports.com. And they originally had posted that they were hoping to have the season finale once again at that racetrack in 2026. Now, it was also reported by Bob Pockrass earlier today when people were asking about it maybe getting the season finale in 2026 that they have been planning to bid to get a race at Homestead Miami Miami Speedway for the championship race once again in the 2026 season. We already know that Homestead will not be in the playoffs in 2025 as it moves away to go to March in 2025. My theory is that they move Homestead Miami Speedway early in the year, probably, of course, one, for a little bit better weather, but number two, it's also because of the fact that they've been trying to plan it, and they could have more time to plan to get the renovations done. Homestead is a fantastic racetrack. We saw one of the all-time classic and greatest races in NASCAR history earlier today. I'd argue probably the best race of the year, even though Kansas is up there too, and you consider that race to be one of the better races from earlier this year. We saw amazing racing throughout the day, and this is no disrespect to Phoenix. Phoenix is a really good facility. They've got a lot of great upgrades over there and done a lot of great renovations. The problem is the racing product, which is the main thing you should be focusing on, is not that good at Phoenix. But it's not a track that can put on a fantastic product. It really never has put on an amazing product over the years throughout NASCAR history. So obviously, I think Homestead should be hosting a season finale. Now, obviously, they need to get some renovations in there, and the attendance from earlier today just was not that good, and that's something that they're definitely going to have to work on going forward. But I think if you give Homestead the championship race back once again in 2025, I think you're going to see overall just an amazing fan reception. And you ask most fans, they think Homestead absolutely deserves to be hosting the season finale. I think there's a really good chance it is going to happen next in the 2026, especially the fact that everyone is clamoring for it now. I think that they need to be working toward it at this point. They need to get this bid done immediately. Homestead owns the racetrack. Yes, NASCAR does promotion for it, but Homestead owns the facility. Homestead, city officials, you need to get working on it right now. If you can get the season finale back at this track again, you are going to get a lot of people very, very happily. And I think it should be the host of the season finale going forward. Today's race was an absolute barn burner from start to finish. And again, it should absolutely, without question, be hosting the season finale in 2026. It's going to have to happen soon because personally the racing was amazing. It was incredible all weekend. It was good. The truck race was really solid and the Xfinity race was really good as well. So I really hope it does in fact end up getting a season finale because I do think Homestead absolutely has earned the right to get it once again, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Allgaier. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Justin Allgaier has signed a multi-year contract extension to continue driving for Junior Motorsports. He has signed that contract through the 2026 season to continue driving a number 7 car. It was also confirmed that Brown will also be sticking around through the 2026 season. This has been expected to happen, of course, for the last couple months. It had been originally reported by Bubba Parsell that Justin Allgaier most likely will be back with JRM in 2025. This is an absolute no-brainer. Justin Allgaier has been with Junior Motorsports since the 2016 season and has been a consistent championship threat and championship contender with this team. He's been up front a lot. He's won races most years. He got multiple wins in 2017. He won a ton of races in 2018. Made it to the Final Four in 2019. Also in 2017 made the Final Four. I think he made the Final Four in 2020. 2021 I think he nearly made the Final Four. 2022 made the Final Four. All 3 of the 4 JRM cars made the Final Four that year, and then he's got a really good chance to make the Final Four this year. He's also won over 25 NASCAR Xfinity Series wins, and he's inside the top 10 winningest drivers in Xfinity Series competition. He is one of the best to ever do it in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and while he's never won a championship at this point, you cannot deny that he is one of the best drivers in the history of this series. He's also going to be the anchor for this organization going into 2025. You're going to have a really young team, and having a veteran over there is going to help. Remember, you're going to have Carson Quaffle driving the 1 car. Carson is going to be a championship threat next year, especially on the short tracks. Been so strong on the short tracks this year. Marty Lindley might be the crew chief. We're not sure at this point for that car, but he will be with the 1 team in 2025. You've got Conor Zilisch, the hot young phenom, who has set the world on fire this year, done an absolute amazing job in the few Xfinity Series races. He did finish 12th in Homestead, but he's done an incredible job, won in his Xfinity Series debut over guys like Shane Van Gisbergen and even Sheldon Creed as well. And then you're going to have Sammy Smith, probably the weak link of the team, but Sammy's not a bad driver, all things considered. He has shown potential and has shown flashes of brilliance this year, including getting that win at Talladega. I expect that Justin Allgaier will be a championship contender not only in 2025, but also in 2026 as well. And he'll be around 40 years old at that time. And the big question will be for Justin is, will you potentially retire at the end of that year? That could certainly be a possibility. But if Justin is continuing to be super competitive in that 2026 campaign, I think he will continue to stick around and contend for championships. He's a very good driver, in my opinion, who always gets the best out of equipment. He's been a really good driver, and some drivers may go to Cup and they end up struggling, but guys like Justin Allgaier can't perform consistently, and having a driver that's a veteran for the series can really help teach these younger drivers, especially how to race with a lot of respect. That's a big thing for me. The respect in some of these series is definitely gone, and I think Justin Allgaier coming back to this team for 2025 is absolutely the move that needed to be made. It's a great decision, in my opinion, to keep him around. He's done a fantastic job, and I think he's absolutely earned the right, in my honest opinion, to continue sticking around with Junior Motorsports. He's going to have a lot of good drivers to go up against, guys like Taylor Gray next year, Williams Watch, all those guys moving up, but I think that he's done a really solid job, and I'm looking forward to see what Justin Allgaier can do for the next couple years. Congratulations to Justin Allgaier on getting a multiple-year extension with Junior Motorsports going into the next few years. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about Conor Jones and Matt Mills. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, you probably saw one of the most talked moments from yesterday when it comes to the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series race. So about 70 laps in the event with about 60 laps to go in the Craftsman Truck Series race, Conor Jones made a really major dive bomb and Matt Mills came down to block him going into turn number 3. Conor Jones, for whatever reason, goes up, drives a couple tenths into the corner, and just completely flat out dumps Matt Mills going into turn number 3. Matt Mills then would hit the outside wall really hard. The truck would end up catching on fire. Matt Mills would end up getting, of course, sent to the hospital, which I'll get to that here in just a second. But Matt Mills would get out of his truck under his own power, but then unfortunately had to end up laying down. And then we saw Conor Jones get on the radio and have a very, very big rant about getting blocked by Matt Mills throughout the whole entire year and was very, very frustrated on the radio for the incident. NASCAR, because they saw it being an intentional crash, handed out a 2-lap penalty and was held for 2 laps. And then, because of what happened, Matt Mills, unfortunately, got sent to the hospital because I think he inhaled a ton of smoke, if I'm not mistaken, and had to go to the hospital. And at this time, they've kept Matt Mills overnight for observation. He's not been released at this time. We'll probably have an update tomorrow or later today in regards to that, but then he was sent to the hospital. And then Conor Jones the media tried to basically ask him questions about what ended up happening. He kind of held back on answering those questions. And then he did release an apology, but it looked a little bit, it looked AI, stuff like that, but I'm not going to speculate on that. He probably had his PR team write this. I personally don't think Conor Jones wrote this. Now, obviously a lot of people are justifiably mad, and it's absolutely justified. Conor Jones has a terrible reputation in NASCAR. Not just in NASCAR, but in the Cars Tour. I said this during my review, and I'm going to say it again. Conor Jones probably should have been parked for the rest of the race. I don't personally think a 2-lap penalty was enough. I'm glad NASCAR did take some action here, but I think he should have been parked for the rest of the race. Because this is not the first time that Conor Jones has gone on a rant on the radio and has gotten pissed off and intentionally done things on the racetrack. Conor Jones has a bad reputation. He's wrecked people for the win in the Cars Tour over the years. He has also done this from what people have said at Dominion Raceway where he raced, and he just has a bad reputation. The problem is that Conor Jones is in that truck because of money. His father owns a company called Jones Utility, which they have a lot of money from what I know. And obviously Conor Jones is there because of that. Conor Jones in 17 Truck Series starts has 0 top 10 finishes. Meanwhile, you got a guy like Luke Fenhaus, who's made 3 starts in that truck, has 2 top 10s, by the way. One of those coming at my home track of Gateway. He should be in that truck over Conor Jones. I think that Conor Jones should be for sure suspended for the rest of the season without question. He should not be allowed to run the final 2 races. An apology is not enough, and a 2-lap penalty is not enough. You send a guy to the hospital, my guy. You intentionally wreck somebody at high speeds. That is not okay, and that is unacceptable for any sort of racing standards. There has to be some cleaning up with standards, and I think there's a lot of drivers who've done better. I think the Truck Series has definitely done a lot better when it comes to that. But the fact that Conor Jones did this and went on a rant, dude, you didn't have to do that. You know better. It doesn't matter if he blocked you. You don't just send somebody in the corner and just dump them at 150 miles an hour going in the corner. That is unacceptable. So I am really hoping that NASCAR, when the penalty report does come out tomorrow, because I do think a penalty will be coming tomorrow for this, I hope it's not a fine and it's not a points penalty. It needs to be suspensions for the rest of the year. He sent a guy to the hospital, and he's still in the hospital, by the way, so we don't know when he's going to get released from the hospital. So this definitely, there needs to be some major penalties coming for Connor Jones, because personally, in my opinion, what Connor Jones did is unforgivable, inexcusable, and not called for, in my opinion. It was just completely uncalled for. Really stupid, really childish from Connor Jones, and he absolutely deserves to be suspended for the rest of the year. In my personal opinion, he should be kicked out of the sport with the way he does things, because that was unacceptable, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Preece once again. Now, earlier tonight, Lee Spencer from Catchments.com and also some stuff from PRN as well, she posted a very interesting tweet. Now, later today, there is going to be a tire test that's going to take place at Homestead Miami Speedway. She does note the 42 car, which John Hermanchuk, I think, will drive, and the 48 car, which Alex Bowman will drive, will be part of the wet weather tire test to try to find a way to get wet weather tires on 1.5 miles to try to speed up the process there. If you notice the tweet, though, she mentioned the 6 for RFK Racing, and she mentioned Ryan Preece. Now, it is no secret that it's been expected for a while that Ryan Preece is more than likely going to be headed over to RFK Racing in 2025. They are expected to pick up a third charter, that being RFK Racing, and they're expected to get that charter from Rick Ware Racing. The number 15 charter, I believe, will be leased out to the number 60 car, which might be the number they end up using, but there's been some theories about maybe the 26 and maybe even the 29 as well. There have been major rumors about this. Now, why is Ryan Preece the favorite for this seat? Well, Ryan Preece has a previous working relationship with Kroger. When he drove for JTG Doherty Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series, Kroger, of course, worked with the team. And JTG Doherty Racing is expected to lose their Kroger sponsorship at the end of this year. And they've been rumored to be headed to RFK Racing. Originally, they were expected to go to Joe Gibbs Racing, but Chad and Jody Scheckter, from what I know, have left the Kroger group. So that means that they're going to be headed to RFK Racing. And Kroger has a lot of funding that they have. And they're going to need a third car to fund it out. This could also lead to maybe having an Xfinity Series program in the future as well. Just saying. But Ryan Preece has a previous working relationship. Now, Ryan Preece is the last Stewart Haas Racing driver that does not have a ride currently at the moment for 2025. Noah Grayson's going to Front Row Motorsports, Josh Berry's going to the Wood Brothers, and Chase Briscoe, of course, is going over to Joe Gibbs Racing. Ryan Preece, in my opinion, is a very solid race car driver. He was really good in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for Joe Gibbs Racing, got a couple wins with that team in 2017 and 2018, and has won a couple races with DGR Crossley, or DGR Racing at the time, for the switch over to Tricon Garage. I don't think a lot of people don't think Ryan Preece is that good of a driver, and I disagree with that. Ryan Preece has not been in the best equipment in the world. He joined JTG Doherty, and in the last year he drove for them. It was an uncharted car that didn't get a lot of funding. And then, of course, that ride downsized to a one-car team. And then he joined SHR in 2023. The first year that they failed to win a race, by the way. No one won a race at SHR, and they struggled for the most part, though Kevin Harvick had some flash to brilliance throughout the year. And I remember Ryan Preece having a really strong run at Martinsville early in the year. Led a ton of laps. I think he also won a stage. He got a playoff point as well. I think Ryan Preece being at RFK Racing is actually a really good move. I think he is a very talented driver, and I think he'll do a really good job if he truly does, in fact, end up over there next year. And I think he would do a really good job next year if he got the chance and opportunity. We don't know who the crew chief could end up being. There is a chance his announcement could be happening. There's been rumors about it happening. And again, I do think Ryan Preece does deserve a solid chance and opportunity with a really, really good team. Do I think he'll be the best performer at RFK Racing next year if he does end up there? No, I don't think he will be. I think the best performer will probably still be Brad Keselowski, but Chris Buescher's performed so well this year, one of the most consistent drivers, that I think he's got a good chance and opportunity still being the best performer. But could he be a playoff contender next year? That could certainly be a possibility. That would not shock me or surprise me at this point if he ended up going there. I think it's very likely that's going to happen. The fact that it continues to get reported out there, and many people are now starting to speculate that this is going to happen, We'll have to wait and see what the number is, and we'll have to kind of wait and see what the official announcement is. There are still some other Cup rides not announced at this point. Obviously, Riley Herbst's likely going to 23XI Racing, though they're in the lawsuit currently at the moment. Michael Jordan, which of course the team did end up winning the race today. And then of course front row, we know that Zane Smith's likely going to a third front row seat, but they're also waiting on a decision if they're going to get it for the litigation, which is about a week from now when that is going to end up getting decided. By the way, I think next Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, is when that's going to happen. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that, and we'll end up seeing if Ryan Preece goes there. But like I said, I think Ryan Preece will officially be headed to RFK Racing in 2025. I think that announcement is coming not too far down the road here. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith. Now, we've talked a lot about Chandler Smith on the channel around speculation on his future. I've kind of reported on this a couple times, but there's been a lot of rumors going around that Chandler Smith will not be back at Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. Well, Chandler Smith, after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race concluded yesterday, let the cat out of the bag. He has pretty much confirmed that he does not have a ride currently at the moment for 2025 and has pretty much confirmed as well that he will not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. He said he is going to race like hell during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race on Saturday evening at Martinsville because he is racing for his job currently at the moment. There is no secret this has been expected. From what I have heard, Chandler Smith has lost a lot of funding and a lot of sponsorship this year. He had a lot of funding going over to Joe Gibbs Racing for 2024, and a lot of that funding has unfortunately ended up drying up. And then, of course, we know who's going to be joining Joe Gibbs Racing full-time next year. William Swalch will drive the number 18 car full-time for JGR next year. We know that Taylor Gray will be driving the 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing, and Brandon Jones most likely will be behind the wheel of the number 19 car. We also know that Sheldon Creed will not be back with his team, but he does have a ride for next year with the Haas factory team in the 00 car. Chandler Smith, in my opinion, is a very solid race car driver. But unfortunate thing, reality is that you can be a really, really good driver, but unfortunately the business of the sport is that you have to have a lot of funding and sponsorship. But it really is a shame to see that someone as talented as Chandler Smith may not have a seat going into 2025. And it really is a shame. Now, let's say he doesn't go back to JGR like it's expected, along with guys like Ryan Truex, Corey America, and Marola. What does this mean for Chandler Smith's future? I think Chandler Smith has some options going into next year. He has apparently been talking to some teams. There has been talk about Front Row Motorsports being a potential option for next year for him. Bob Pockers know that a couple times. However, that ride, that third seat, is going to another Smith most likely, that being Zane Smith. So I don't think that ride is available for Chandler Smith going into 2025. Maybe 23XI, but I don't think that's going to be a possibility. What about Legacy Motor Club? There's been some wild rumors about Legacy Motor Club maybe making more driver changes. There was rumor about John Nemechek maybe losing his seat. I just don't know if that's going to happen at this point. And Riley Herbst, from what I heard, had been rumored at one point to Legacy, so I don't think that's going to be a possibility. If you want to stay in Xfinity, Sam Hunt Racing could definitely be an option. That's a team that's been really building up their program. He actually has driven for them in the past. So I think going over to a team like that would honestly not be a bad move for Chandler Smith. The 26 car has shown some really solid speed at points. They work with Toyota, and they'd be getting a lot more support if that became a possibility. Maybe he gets less funding, goes to a team like Jordan Anderson Racing. That could be an option for next year, or maybe goes down to the truck series. There are a lot of truck rides that are available going into 2025. There's obviously other teams down there, of course. There's rumors about Spire making some moves down there. Tricon has a bunch of rides that are still available for 2025. You've got other teams like I said, McInerney Hilgeman. We don't know what they're doing yet at the moment. Maybe he goes down there. That could certainly be a possibility. Now, some people have noted that Chandler Smith has also burned bridges. I go back to that Colleague situation. He had like a multi-year deal with Colleague Racing when he joined him in 2023, and then he kind of shockingly out of nowhere announced he'd be going back into the Toyota stable and racing in Toyota once again in 2024. When this got announced, I was definitely a little bit shocked, but I also was not surprised that he was headed back to Joe Gibbs Racing, but I really thought that there was a chance. My theory is that he was waiting for Martin Truex Jr. to retire, and I think he was next in line to either take over the number 19 car or take over the 43 car. The problem is Stewart Haas Racing ended up shutting down. Now, Eric Jones had emerged the candidate for the 19 car, but they chose Chase Briscoe, who, in my opinion, no offense to Chandler Smith, Chase Briscoe is a better driver than Chandler Smith. Chase Briscoe's got multiple Cup wins, one more race in Xfinity than Chandler Smith. I think he's a really solid driver, that being Chase Briscoe. But it's such a shame to see a guy who will be leading in the Winston Cup era of the standings in Xfinity competition and has a lot of top 10s recently, and while he hasn't won a lot of races, there's only been a couple guys that have won more than 3 races. Austin Hill's won the most races. Guess how many he's won? 4. No one's won a ton of races this year, so it is a shame to see a driver like Chandler Smith maybe on the sidelines going into 2025. But it also isn't shocking. This is how the business is, unfortunately. A guy like Chandler Smith who has proven himself, has shown potential over the years, and I go back a few years ago, there was so much hype around Chandler Smith like 5 years ago. Remember how much hype he had back in the day? Especially then, driving for teams like Venturini Motorsports and getting sponsorship to help him out. But when you lose your funding and sponsorship in the sport, and you're not as talented as a guy like Kyle Larson or a guy like Tyler Reddick, even Bubba Wallace at this point, you basically end up losing your seat because they want someone to get in there. I look at Joe Gibbs Racing's lineup, though, going next year. It is so weak in 2025. I think the perfect lineup for Joe Gibbs Racing would be guys like Chandler Smith, Corey Heim, and Ryan Truex. 3 really, really good drivers who, in my opinion, deserve to be full-time with a Joe Gibbs Racing seat, which obviously Corey Heim won't be there because Ty Gibbs has ownership stake in their Xfinity Series program now. But I really, really, really hope that Chandler gets a chance and opportunity to be full-time. It is a shame to see that he will likely not be back with Joe Gibbs Racing. And it's really disappointing, like I said, to see because I truly do believe that Chandler Smith should be full-time in the series next year. Or maybe even have an opportunity at Cup, right? He has got potential to win Cup races and maybe even a Cup championship. And I think if he got that chance and opportunity to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series, I think he'd be able to prove himself. He is a really solid driver, in my opinion. He is certainly capable, and I really hope, like I said, that he's able to find a ride for 2025. But there's also a chance this could be his last year in NASCAR. And that is sad to see if it's true. It's crazy to think that someone just a few years ago who we all thought would be a Cup talent and maybe a potential champion of the sport may not be in NASCAR at the end of the year. He may not have a ride at all going into next year, which is definitely shocking. But unfortunately, like I said, money's a big part of the sport. And he, unfortunately, like I said, did burn some bridges along the way that unfortunately affected him. So we'll have to kind of wait and see in regards to what happens to Chandler Smith going to 2025. But like I said, it sounds very, very likely at this moment in point that Chandler Smith will not be racing in NASCAR, even Joe Gibbs Racing next year. He's pretty much confirmed it at this point. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List schedule below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think Chandler Smith will have a ride in 2025 or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Ryan Preece is truly headed to RFK? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, you will, of course, be seeing the race picks for the Craftsman Truck Series race in Martinsville. You're also going to be hearing me talk about who I think will join Tyler Reddick and Joe Logano in the championship for Wednesday, we'll have a NASCAR news video and Xfinity Series race picks for Martinsville. And then Thursday, we'll have Cup race picks for Martinsville and, of course, the Penske video as well. And then Friday, we'll have a NASCAR news video along with, of course, the Truck Series race review. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.